So, when we talk about serial killers, what's the first image that typically comes to mind? For most of us, it's probably someone, physically imposing, overtly sinister, right? Maybe a bit of a hulking figure from a horror movie. But today, we're taking a deep dive into a case from China that absolutely shatters every one of those expectations. And frankly, it leaves you with more questions than answers about, well, the depths of human nature.
Yeah, what's truly striking about this particular case is how a deeply disturbing, monstrous reality was entirely cloaked by such an outwardly benign, almost pitiable facade. We're talking about Zhang Shuhong, a man over 50 years old, paralyzed in both legs, reliant on crutches. He was known to be a devout Buddhist, even maintaining an altar in his small home. And he was widely considered kind and honest by his neighbors. Imagine that contrast.
It's an immediate gut punch, isn't it? The incongruity of it all is just, it's stark. So, our mission today is to unravel, piece by chilling piece, how such a seemingly gentle and disabled man could be responsible for a horrifying series of murders over many years, completely undetected. We'll explore the sources you've provided, including these incredibly detailed accounts from the YouTube channel Ji Manhua On, to understand not just the how, but maybe even begin to grasp the unsettling why of this chilling case. Okay, let's unpack this. The contrast here is immediately striking.
Absolutely. What's fascinating here is how a deeply disturbing reality was cloaked by such a benign facade.
So the threads of this investigation, they started to weave together in July 2010. A daughter arrived at the Shengyi District Police Station in Jilin City, frantic, reporting her mother missing. Her mother was Zhang Jin, 49 years old, a freelance laborer. After days of no contact, the daughter went searching herself in Jilin City. Didn't find her, but a few colleagues at the labor market remembered seeing Zhang Jin leave with a man for a nanny job.
And that single missing person report, unsettling as it was, it quickly broadened into something far more alarming. Shortly after, the authorities received 5 more missing persons reports, all with eerie similarities. Li Lianglang, Lu Fuji, Pang Shulin, Biyakun, and Meng Zuki. The common threads were just, well, undeniable. It immediately suggested a pattern to investigators. All freelance laborers, all female, aged between 45 and 55, and all had vanished after apparently securing work. This immediately led the police to suspect a single perpetrator was behind these disappearances.
But trying to trace these women must have been incredibly difficult for the police. I mean, none of them had stable employment, which made tracking their movements a nightmare. And to make things even harder, these nannies, they were hired directly by homeowners at the labor market, completely bypassing any formal agencies. That meant zero registration information, no employer details, just a complete dead end. Can you imagine trying to find someone with so little to go on?
Oh, it was an immense challenge. Akin to finding a needle in a haystack, as the police themselves described it. Their efforts included deploying female officers, aged 40 to 50, to go undercover at the labor market for days on end, posing as women seeking work. They waited, they observed, but found absolutely no leads. The frustration in the field must have been immense, especially as the number of missing women just kept growing.
Right. Despite those overwhelming challenges, the police persisted. They started meticulously collecting information from anyone who might have known the missing women. Other laborers, friends, family members, previous employers. They were looking for any small detail, appearance, clothing, daily habits, hoping to find that one valuable clue that could crack the case wide open.
And then on August 12th, a breakthrough arrived, seemingly out of nowhere. It came from a family member of one of the missing victims, Biyakun. She recalled a pivotal detail that suddenly shone a light on the investigation. Just before she vanished, Biyakun had returned home briefly to deposit her earnings. While there, she mentioned to her family that she had just taken a new job caring for an elderly, disabled man, a man who used crutches to get around.
Wow. That seemingly small detail for the police must have been monumental. It offered a direction, finally. The family member even provided a pretty specific description of this man, around 1.6 meters tall, aged between 50 and 55. His home had a Buddhist altar, he was described as kind, and crucially, he lived near Yan'an Street, an area where houses were slated for demolition. How did this particular information help them narrow their focus?
It was a game changer because it gave them distinct, actionable parameters. With that information, police immediately concentrated their search within a 2-kilometer radius of Yan'an Street. They specifically targeted residential areas marked for demolition. They deployed over 30 officers to intensively investigate every building, looking for a man matching that description. Disabled legs, using crutches, and with a Buddhist altar in his home. It allowed them to move from a random search to a highly targeted one.
And by August 17th, just 5 days after that critical tip, the police had identified two potential suspects living in the railway residential area southeast of Yan'an Street. These were their top two leads.
Let's first consider Mr. Zhang, the first suspect. He was 62, disabled from an accident 6 years prior, used crutches and a wheelchair. He was a devout Buddhist with an altar at home, so that matched several key details. However, he lived alone, never hired nannies, and was described as quite cheerful, often inviting children over to play. His house was often open, people coming and going. Given that open environment, it was deemed highly unlikely he could commit multiple hidden murders. His profile simply didn't align with the isolation necessary for such crimes.
Okay. So if Mr. Zheng didn't fit, then their attention would have sharpened on the second suspect. And that's where Zhang Shuhong enters the picture. He was 51 years old, divorced, and had been paralyzed since childhood, also requiring crutches. His father was seriously ill, which explained why they constantly needed to hire nannies. His father, a retired senior engineer, provided a sufficient pension for their living expenses. But what really started to raise questions was the rapid turnover of nannies in their household. Zhang Shuhong would explain this away by claiming his father had an erratic temper, supposedly throwing things and verbally abusing them. He appeared kind, outwardly, but he lived in almost complete isolation, rarely inviting guests over. And yes, he had a large, well-maintained Buddhist altar with lights on day and night, just as the victim's family described. Here's where it gets really interesting. The details about Zhang Shuhong's household just scream red flag in retrospect.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the rapid turnover of nannies, coupled with his isolation and the detailed description from a victim's family, began to paint a very clear picture for investigators. It became evident that Zhang Shuhong was the far more compelling lead, the one who truly warranted closer examination. He had the means, the motive for his father's care, and the controlled environment implied by the nanny turnover.
So, with their suspect identified, the police pinpointed Zhang Shuhong's exact residence. Unit 3, Building 16 in the railway industry residential area, Southeast Sunji District, Jilin City. They immediately began 24-hour surveillance.
Surveillance proved incredibly difficult, though. The house's windows were always closed with curtains drawn, apparently due to a dense vegetable garden and many trees behind the house. Zhang Shuhong claimed this was to prevent insects from entering. It made it virtually impossible to observe what was happening inside during the day. Only at night could they see the lights on, but it was still hard to discern who was inside or what was occurring.
But there was one crucial detail that kept confirming their target and helped them distinguish it from other homes. The home frequently had a distinct sandalwood scent. This matched the description given by one of the victim's sons, who had mentioned it as a notable characteristic of the suspect's home. It was like a specific fingerprint of the house.
Exactly. So to avoid alerting Zhang Shuhong, the head of the Shungji Public Security Bureau devised a clever plan. He disguised himself as a water meter reader, accompanied by another officer posing as a community worker to gain entry under a pretext. The moment they stepped inside, they were met by a bodhisattva statue in the living room and that faint, lingering scent of sandalwood from an incense burner. This immediately confirmed their suspicions. They swiftly arrested Zhang Shuhong and his second wife, Li Yongqi, who was 7 years his junior, without any resistance.
Wow. And the house search that followed revealed overwhelming and chilling evidence. They found various tools, a kitchen knife, an axe, and coils of nylon ropes. When tested, all were confirmed to contain the victim's DNA. Dried bloodstains were even recovered from the kitchen floor. An incredibly horrific detail. But perhaps most damningly, a cache of gold, female jewelry earrings, bracelets, necklaces, and rings was discovered hidden in a corner of the backyard. These items were photographed and positively identified by the victims' families as belonging to the missing women. Faced with all of this, what happened next?
Faced with such irrefutable physical evidence, Zhang Shuhong's defense completely collapsed. On August 21st, he confessed to everything, and his primary motive, once it was revealed, was truly bizarre, almost unbelievable. He told investigators that in early 2009, he had consulted a fortune teller, told him he wouldn't live past 53 years old. At 50 and already suffering from severe diabetes and declining health, he blindly believed this prediction.
So he was facing what he believed was his impending death, and this fortune teller's prophecy was the catalyst. What did he do with this grim belief?
He took it to the most horrific extreme. To secure his second wife, Li Yongqi's financial future after his predicted death, he hatched a horrifying plan. He conspired with her to kill and rob people for money and gold. Starting from May 2009, he and Li Yongqi went on to murder a total of 7 people, 6 female nannies, and one 24-year-old man. Through these unspeakable acts, they accumulated over 30,000 RMB, and a quantity of gold jewelry.
That's an astonishing number of victims for someone with his physical limitations. Let's dig into the twisted modus operandi because it's truly chilling how he operated despite those challenges. For his first murder, the 24-year-old male victim, Mr. Lee Zhang-Shuhong, used a very specific lure.
Yes, his initial approach was quite distinct. He advertised in a newspaper, claiming to have fortune-telling abilities, aiming to draw unsuspecting individuals to his home. An easy target. Mr. Lee, seeking insights into his business prospects, fell for the deception. Zhang Shuhong, of course, knew nothing about fortune-telling, so he simply concocted a story. Then, he offered Lee a cup of what he called blessed water for good luck. This water, in fact, was secretly laced with a high dose of sleeping pills. Lee drank it, quickly fell asleep, allowing Zhang Shuhong to easily strangle him.
And what happened after this first murder? Did he find what he was looking for?
Not at all. After all that effort, Zhang Shuhong searched Mr. Lee's pockets and was enraged to find only 20 RMB. He was furious, considering he'd spent 240 RMB just on the advertisement for his fortune-telling services. He even tried to recoup his losses by attempting a failed blackmail scheme, sending a letter to Mr. Lee's family address that the victim had mentioned, but it went unanswered. The profit from his first murder was negative, which clearly prompted a strategic shift.
Right. So after that loss, he pivoted from fortune-telling to targeting freelance nannies. How did he select his victims in this new strategy?
He developed specific selection criteria, demonstrating a chillingly calculated approach. He focused on women wearing visible jewelry, assuming they would carry more cash or have valuable items. And crucially, he targeted those from distant rural areas, believing they would have fewer local connections, making them less likely to be traced. It was a cold, almost predatory efficiency.
He would invite them home, claiming they were needed to care for his bedridden father, and while they were there, he'd continue the deception. Falsely claiming to be a devout Buddhist, well-read, even capable of fortune-telling. This, you can imagine, would exploit the victim's relatively superstitious backgrounds and build a sense of trust. Then, the same pattern. He would offer them the blessed water, the sleeping pills he'd used on his first victim. Once the nannies fell unconscious, he would calmly strangle them with nylon rope.
And the methods of body disposal were arguably even more horrifying and methodical than the murders themselves. After strangulation, Zhang Shuhong would use a kitchen knife to dismember the bodies. Then, to prevent neighbors from detecting any unusual smell, he would actually cook the body parts. Some cooked remains were poured down the drain, while the bones were placed into trash bags and discarded into the Songhua River. This isn't just about eliminating evidence, it speaks to a profound depersonalization, a clinical approach that is incredibly disturbing. It completely belies his physical limitations, showing an internal drive to control every aspect of the crime, including its aftermath.
So what does this all mean? The meticulous, almost clinical approach to disposal, despite his physical limitations, is incredibly disturbing. It forces us to confront a deeper question, doesn't it? What kind of mindset enables such systematic, gruesome acts?
It raises an important question about the psychological shift from opportunistic murder to a systematic, almost ritualistic method of eliminating evidence. His careful planning belies his outward appearance. His careful planning, from the selection of victims to the disposal of remains, completely belies his outward appearance as a frail, devout man. This level of organization and control, especially when physically disadvantaged, suggests a profound lack of empathy, coupled with a strong need for control. It's a key distinction from spontaneous acts of violence, demonstrating a chilling internal logic.
And as if the story couldn't get any darker, we learn there was another victim, his own daughter. It truly begs the question, how could this man descend to such a level of depravity? Let's delve into his past, because it's surprisingly contradictory. Zhang Shuhong came from what seemed like a privileged background. His father was a senior engineer, his mother an excellent teacher, and his siblings lived comfortably or even abroad. Logically, his childhood environment wasn't one that would typically foster such malice.
And you're right, it's a stark contrast to his crimes. However, the roots of his twisted personality lay in early trauma and isolation. He suffered from polio as a child, which paralyzed his legs and made walking extremely difficult. He was frequently bullied by classmates because of his disability. While his lower body was severely affected, his hands were strong and his mind was fully functional. This combination of physical vulnerability, social rejection, and a sharp mind often leads to profound isolation and the development of extreme, reclusive, and sometimes deeply resentful personalities.
In 1982, at 23, he married Zhao Shu, who also had polio. After 4 years, they remained childless. Tests revealed Zhao Shu was normal. The infertility was Zhang Shuhong's. While his wife wasn't overly stressed about it, Zhang Shuhong was apparently desperate for a biological child.
And his desperation led to a shocking and, frankly, highly unethical solution. He begged and eventually convinced his wife and his brother, who initially strongly opposed it, to use his brother's sperm for conception. In 1987, his daughter, Zhang Zhen, was born. This incident alone is a crucial detail, you see, because it indicates that his psychological framework had already deviated significantly from normal moral principles long before the murders began. He was willing to manipulate and coerce his family for his own desires.
Despite initially doting on Zhang Xin, his ex-wife once recounted how he bought her 6 pairs of leather shoes at once. Her coldness and indifference towards him pierced his already distorted psyche like 1,000 needles. It seems the fact that she wasn't truly his biological child, combined with her detachment, festered in him. Zhang Shuhong later had an affair, which led to his divorce from Xiao Shu in 1991 when Zhang Xin was just 4. Because Xiao Shu had an unstable job and Zhang Shuhong's family was better off, Zhang Xin was left in his care.
And Zhang Xin's continued rejection only deepened his resentment. As she grew older, she remained distant, even preferring to run to her dance classes rather than ride on his electric bike, possibly out of embarrassment about her disabled father. Xiao Shu stated she never understood why her daughter treated Zhang Shuhong that way. This compounded his sense of emotional injury.
And this brings us to the ultimate betrayal, the murder of his own daughter. In July 1998, Zhang Xin's dance teacher reported her missing. At the time, Zhang Shuhong told his ex-wife that Zhang Xin had run away to her mother's, but Xiao Shu found no trace of her daughter. It was only during his later serial killer confession that Zhang Shuhong also admitted to murdering Zhang Xin. What was his chilling motive for this unthinkable act?
His motive was chillingly personal and rooted in profound narcissistic injury. He stated he was enraged by her coldness and indifference, feeling his love was splashed with cold water after he had defied all moral principles to have her born. He saw her as an extension of himself, and her rejection was an unbearable affront. He gave Zhang Xin a small dose of sleeping pills, which didn't fully incapacitate her. He then stabbed her while she was crying in panic, and just as he would with his later victims, he disposed of her body using the same gruesome method, dismembering, cooking, and discarding the bones in the Songhua River. When asked about killing his own daughter in detention, his cold reply summed up his profound psychological aberration. Anyway, she wasn't my child. That statement strips away any pretense of affection or connection, reducing her to a mere object.
The depth of a depravity, especially with his own daughter, is almost unfathomable. It's a statement that truly lays bare everything.
Indeed. This case truly pushes the boundaries of our understanding of motive. Was it purely blind superstition, cold greed, a deeply wounded ego, or something even more profoundly disturbed simmering beneath the surface? His refusal to disclose what he called the true reason for his actions, even at the very end, leaves us with a truly dark mystery.
Both Zhang Shuhong and Li Yangqi were sentenced to death for their inhumane acts. On December 26, 2013, Zhang Shuhong was executed by firing squad.
And here's an ironic detail, given his initial motivation. He was 54 years old at the time of his execution, 1 year older than the fortune teller's prophecy of 53.
In his final moments on the way to execution, he made one last request, to see his wife, Li Yangqi, which was granted. They met briefly in the vehicle transporting them. It's such a strange, almost mundane request for someone at the end of such a monstrous life.
Even more disturbing are his statements from detention. He told reporters that the only place he missed was the detention room where he'd spent 2 or 3 years, and that he even hoped to return there in the next life. This, combined with his refusal to ever truly explain his full motives, paints a picture of profound psychological aberration. Perhaps a man who found a perverse comfort in control, even in confinement. He never truly revealed the full, underlying reasons why he murdered, as if the past was just a dark cloud to him, or perhaps something he'd compartmentalized so completely even he couldn't access it.
This deep dive has truly pulled back the curtain on a shocking transformation from a seemingly harmless disabled man to a brutal serial killer, driven by a combination of bizarre superstition, cold calculation, and deeply personal emotional wounds. We've gone beyond the initial facts to uncover layers of psychological complexity and truly disturbing details about Zhang Shuhong's life and crimes.
This case fundamentally challenges our perceptions of who a monster can be. It wasn't about physical prowess or outward menace, but about a deeply twisted inner world, a culmination of trauma and distorted belief.
So we're left with this chilling question for reflection. How does a seemingly normal upbringing and outward piety coexist with such monstrous acts, especially when, even the killer himself seemed unwilling or unable to fully articulate his ultimate reasons for the atrocities. What does this tell us about the hidden dark corners of human nature and how much can be concealed behind a benign facade?